there is increasing indication, I think, from things I've seen online that Russia is considering banning Telegram. First of all, do you think this might happen, and what effect do you think this might have on humanity? And in general, what do you think about this?
It can definitely happen. As you said, there are certain indications. There have been certain test attempts to partially ban it. Telegram is no longer accessible in parts of Russia, such as Dagestan. And it will be incredibly sad if Russia restarts its attempts to ban Telegram, because currently it's been used by its population for all kinds of purposes, not just personal communication or economic business activities, but also it's the only platform which allows the Russian people to access independent sources of information. If you think about media outlets such as BBC or any other non-Russian source of information, they're only accessible in Russia through Telegram in the form of Telegram channels. Their websites are banned. Some other social media sites are banned. And as you said, there are indications that Russia is planning to migrate users from existing messaging apps such as WhatsApp and Telegram to their own homegrown tool, which would, of course, be fully transparent to the government and wouldn't allow voices independent from the government to express themselves. It's certainly an alarming trend. We see these attempts in countries that are not famous for protecting freedom of speech, but also increasingly in countries that have been known to protect freedoms. And this creates this vicious circle, because in a way, European countries trying to fight freedom of speech under pretexts that sound legitimate, such as combating misinformation or election interference, they create precedents and they legitimize restrictions to freedom of speech, which then in turn be used by authoritarian regimes. And they would say in places like China or Iran that they're not doing anything different. It's the norm now to restrict voices that don't go in line with the mainstream narrative. That's sad, because one of the things that makes our life interesting is this abundance of different viewpoints, of different people that we get to experience. You limit the freedom of people, you inevitably decelerate economic growth, level of happiness, the way people can contribute to the society, the way people can express themselves. I personally think it would be a huge mistake to ban a tool like Telegram in any country, particularly a large country such as Russia, because the Russian people are incredibly talented and resilient people. They are among the first to start utilizing some of these recent innovations that Telegram implements. They are the early adopters. I'd say them, and also the Americans, perhaps other people from Eastern Europe like Ukrainians and Southeast Asians, they're among the first people to start using any new edition that we launch. They're incredibly hungry for innovation.
So all that said, there's as part of the propaganda and in general, there's attacks on you all over the place. There's misinformation. I've read a bunch of things that are, I think, in a systematic way, lying about you, lying about Telegram. from all angles? Why do you get attacked so much by everybody?
We're protecting freedom of speech is not a way to make a lot of friends.
Yeah.
Because you would inevitably find yourself in a situation where you would be protecting the freedom of the opposition to the current government in any country to express themselves. And then the initial reaction, and a very basic instinctive reaction of any government, would be to say, oh, our opposition shouldn't be trusted and allowed to express themselves because they're actually are agents of some foreign rival, a geopolitical force that wants to destroy our country. This is something that every authoritarian regime in history used. You take Stalinist Russia or Nazi Germany, Maoist China, they'd always use the same trick that say we need to limit your freedom of speech because these people who are masquerading as opposition are actually the agents of this other country that wants to take over. That's why, dear citizens, forget about their freedoms. And now increasingly you see similar attempts in free countries. The initial instinct from, say, President Macron's team when they're confronted with some footage, for example, the footage of his wife slapping him, would be to say it's all fake Russian imagery, something that is inaccurate, something that is misinformation or interference. And then when they are confronted with more information, they have to refine the narrative. So when you find yourself in a situation that you're running this platform like Telegram, and then you protect the freedom to express of ideas that don't go in line with the mainstream narrative, you often find yourself in this crossfire when the forces in power will say that you must be working with some foreign government that they don't like. Inevitably, they would say that, oh, if you're protecting these voices, it's not right. They love you when you're protecting the freedom of speech in a country that is far from them, or better yet, in a country that is their geopolitical rival. They praise you for that, but then they have this bipolar attitude when you do the same in their own country. And they say, no, we loved you for protecting freedom of speech, but not here, not in my backyard. We don't need it here. We're all right. We have free press. And then you find yourself in this weird spot that Ukrainians say you work for the Russians say you work for the Ukrainians. And all this schizophrenia is something that we had to deal with for some time because it's a very easy way to attack you. At some point, you don't understand where it is coming from. Is it our competitors? And we must give credit to our competitors if it's their invention to launch these kind of rumors, because at a certain point they must have realized they can't compete technologically on the product side, so they must do something like this. Or it's just governments launching these rumors, trying to discredit the platform, trying to scare their citizens away from it, because they understand that their power and grip of their own country is in danger as long as they allow a pro-freedom platform to operate.
And through all of this, we should say over and over that you are simply preserving the freedom of speech for all people of Earth, no matter what they believe. as long as they don't call for violence and as long as they're not doing some of the criminal activity that we discussed, including terrorist organizing. But other than that, it doesn't matter what they believe, left wing or right wing. You're just preserving their freedom of speech. Do you think people of Ukraine, people of Russia, and people of Iran, people of all over the world understand that, despite the propaganda against you?
I think people are smart. Every time I meet somebody from one of these countries you mentioned, in real life, people recognize me in the street, say here in Dubai, they come over, they seem incredibly grateful and understanding. The propaganda in each of these countries would tell them a number of things, but they learned to discount it. That's why they're so happy that Telegram exists, is because the way they can understand the world around them is to receive conflicting, mutually exclusive viewpoints from sources that hate each other and try to understand what really is true. Because there's no such thing as an unbiased source of information. When the war in Ukraine started in 2022, I instantly realized Telegram is going to be used to spread propaganda by both sides. And I didn't want Telegram to be used as a tool for war. And I said, and I posted it publicly, I suggested maybe we should just suspend the activity of all politics-related channels in both countries for the time of the war. Maybe we shouldn't have channels in these two countries. And then interestingly, people from both countries revolted against this. They told me, both people in Ukraine and in Russia, that I don't get to babysit them and decide for them what sources of information that they have to be granted access to. They're grown-ups that can make these decisions for themselves. They understand that there is a lot of propaganda. They learn to see through this propaganda. They learn to be able to tell truth from lie. And in this time of war, it was particularly valuable for them to receive as much information as possible because their relatives, their friends who are getting affected and are still getting affected, they want to understand what was going on. At that moment, I realized people are smart. People get it. People can see through it. If you ask most people in any of these countries, do you agree that access to Telegram should be restricted for whatever reason, they would say no.
They hunger to have a voice.
They need a voice and they need a place to share their opinion securely.